Hi, I'm Peter Giannetti, Editor-in-Chief of HomeWorld Business, and I'd like to welcome you to the first of 3 webinars this week presented by the International Housewares Association in collaboration with HomeWorld Business and the NPD Group. The goal here is to deliver critical information for the home and housewares industry during this unprecedented time. As a reminder to all of our attendees today, if you click Gallery View, it will enable you to see all 4 of the participants, me and the 3 panelists, and it might make the experience a little easier to navigate today. You know, as stay-at-home guidelines and orders take hold across the US, many manufacturers are searching for strategies to keep businesses operating, responsive, and productive. And I'm joined today by 3 home and houseware suppliers who will share how they are guiding their companies through the day-to-day challenges of this COVID-19 crisis, with a strategic eye on being better prepared when the recovery begins. We'll run for about 45 minutes, leaving time at the end of the discussion for a Q&A session moderated by Liana Salama, the Vice President of Marketing for the IHA. You'll be able to submit questions as the panel progresses just by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So first, let me introduce our panel before I turn it over to each of them for some opening remarks, and then we move on to the discussion. Joining me today are Steve Greenspon, the founder and CEO of Honey Can Do, which markets home organization and laundry care products and kitchenware. Honey Can Do recently acquired the Joyce Chen brand of ethnic cookware and gadgets. We have Evan Dash, the founder of StoreBound, which designs and distributes Dash kitchen products and Sobro smart furniture. Evan is also a former senior VP in GMM for Macy's. We also have Luke Peters, CEO of NewAir Appliances, which markets wine coolers, beer coolers, ice makers, heating and cooling products. Luke is also CEO of Retail Band, a consultant agency that helps brands grow sales online. So welcome, panelists. Thanks for being here today. We know you're real busy dealing with the challenges that we're about to talk to you about. But I know that the industry is looking for some direction, and I think hearing it from people in the business will give them some perspectives that I think will be very helpful. I think the area for us to start with today is, we'll call it staff and workplace. And this encompasses team safety, transitioning the team to work from home, how to connect and communicate with your team, how you're managing shelter-in-place guidelines, maybe determining which jobs are essential, which staff is essential and non-essential, and perhaps some new or modified operational procedures and methods. Evan from StoreBound, I'd like to start with you in terms of kind of how you've gone about prioritizing your staff and team safety guidelines right now.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm hoping to learn a lot from the other panelists as well. Team is most important to us. And the first thing that we did, we had people, including myself, who were in Asia, in China, around the time that the outbreak had been starting. And we came back, we monitored the situation really closely. At the time, our focus was really around making sure that our factories were restarting and that we were getting all the production capacity possible. But as the situation started to become a little bit more fluid and we realized how serious it was and that there was a chance of spreading, I think we were probably one of the first companies in our neighborhood of New York City that implemented a work from home policy. So what we did was we worked closely with the team to make sure that we had everybody's most up-to-date contact information, that we had an understanding of exactly what their responsibilities outside of work were, any travel plans, any traveling that they'd previously done. And then we really started building a short-term roadmap of what we would need to do with focus on cash flow, which I know we'll go to in a little while. The other thing that we did is as this started to really materialize, we implemented a long-term work from home. We made sure that everybody had the equipment that they needed to work from home, made sure that we understood childcare responsibilities, elder care responsibilities, that we stayed in touch with everybody. We're already built on a lot of more modern applications. So we were a Zoom company. We have Zoom rooms with cameras that move around. So it's been a little bit more seamless for us than some others that I've dealt with. And like I was saying, when it started to get really, really worrisome and it seemed, and we could tell how serious this was going to be, one of the first things we did was pulled the team together and we reviewed with them the health of the company, what our financial plan was, and that basically we delivered the message to them, we have your back. There aren't going to be layoffs, there aren't going to be furloughs, and that for the foreseeable future, they're going to be gainfully employed. On the flip side of that, we said, more than ever, we really need you to step up and make sure that you're giving back to us and helping us basically help you.
Steve, give me some examples of some things that maybe were unique to your situation that you had to deal with regard to kind of getting your team prepared and in the right position to produce while they might be working from home.
So we were inadvertently, I would say, very well prepared for working from home. We're based in suburban Chicago. We have about 160 people at our headquarters facility, and we also have the warehouse there. In addition, we've got about 25 people at our office in Shanghai and throughout China and Taiwan. So we had given everybody laptops. That was just standard issue. Whether they typically brought them home or not, if they were in the office setting. And this includes both the Asia folks and our US folks. When China was going through the COVID situation, they were all well prepared to work from home, still be able to stay in communication and still be able to produce there. And they taught us a great deal with the situation about how we separated our staff working at our office building there, just to ensure that there wasn't cross contamination. Here in the US, everybody that can work from home, which is our entire non-warehouse staff, is working from home. We started that a week before the state of Illinois declared the shelter-in-place policy. We wanted to be safe for our staff members and their families and be real proactive on this. We had already started our training with teams, so we were well prepared for that. Had a real strong data connection, had a number of things in the cloud already, so that worked really well in that regard. And I just want to mention my thoughts and wishes are with anybody and everybody that may have been impacted from a health situation in this area, and also I've just been incredibly touched by how the housewares community, and I'll say that both on the vendor side and the retailer side, have really come together and been so incredibly supportive and generous with their support and information and communication. In this regard, we're truly a feeling within the industry that we're all in this together.
Well, thank you, Steve. Luke, I know you mentioned that you put some new warehouse rules or practices in place, and talk a little bit about how you've had to manage warehouse operations during this time with regard to staff safety and all the other issues while remaining productive. And I think the other question is, as you've begun to implement these procedures, what's working and what doesn't work well, and where do you kind of learn from as you move forward?
Yeah, and thanks, Peter. I just want to thank IHA and Liana and everybody for allowing me to be on this panel, and I echo what Steve and Evan have said, and just kind of their progression has been similar to our progression, and the Housewares is an amazing just group of folks, and I've talked to so many people, so everybody's been so helpful. And with us, I would say that the thing that stood out to me at the beginning was I do have a little bit of a microbiology background, and I always thought at the beginning this pandemic was underreported here in the States. So like I was thinking when they're showing morbidity numbers and R naught numbers, and things didn't make sense what some countries were reporting versus other countries. So I took it really serious because I could tell that this thing, I think right now we all understand it's dangerous. I think late January or early February, people they were thinking it was like a flu, and we don't want to forget that was the main sentiment. So in the warehouse, our team, we didn't have remote experience. So we have about 120,000 square foot headquarters over here in Southern California with an office and a warehouse section. We were able to transition to remote work in one day. So I was really proud of the team. We are an Office 360 company. Everybody literally took one day of Teams training and we were off and running. And we put in some basic protocols for teams and some basic protocols for the warehouse. I'll kind of go through those quickly. So for the warehouse, obviously we followed kind of the CDC guidelines. And right at that time, California, I think might have been the first state to do shelter in place. And that's when we quickly transitioned to work at home, but then our warehouse had to keep functioning. So 6 feet away, nobody touches the same equipment. Luckily, we got a huge warehouse and there's plenty of space in there. So dollies, tape guns, even break room tables are individualized per each person. So stopped using the refrigerator, stopped using the freezer. Everybody had to kind of bring their own cooler so that there wasn't any cross-contamination there. So the initial approach was make sure nobody touches anything that anybody else is going to touch. All the doors are propped open at the beginning. So as you walk through the warehouse or even into the office, you don't have to touch any doorknobs. And then, of course, we get hand sanitizer and masks. And even some of our factories freighted us or air freighted masks to us. So that was pretty cool. So we had good support from our factories and had that kind of compliance in the warehouse. And since then, we've improved that even further. And then as far as the team goes, similar to Steve and Evan, we've moved to remote. We moved really quick within a day. It's been seamless, and probably the key winning point that I would take away is that we have a stand up and a stand down meeting every single day within different departments, so you can imagine, say, like an ops one and a sales and marketing. And it's quick, 15 or so minutes with the leaders of those departments. And at the end of the day, same thing, but it's a great way to quickly connect. It doesn't go on and on for an hour, so people aren't wasting their time. And when you're used to working so closely together, this is a great way that we've continued to kind of have that cultural bond.
Before we move on, anyone else have any unique experiences as it relates to communication with the staff, keeping them engaged, and kind of creating a connected feeling, even though you're a few miles apart from one another?
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time on Zoom as a company. So Zoom was really a very, very fluid transition for us. What we've tried to do is that we have so many people who are living alone in New York City, small apartments, and they're really feeling it. I think feeling it a lot more than others. A lot of people have young kids and they're also in smaller spaces. So we've put in a lot of activities in addition to a morning meeting, an afternoon meeting, but we've done happy hours. We've done costumes. We've done formal Friday. This was my formal Friday outfit. So we're just trying to keep it really fun, and that we're finding that people are coming into all those kind of optional meetings and really unwinding a little bit. We've had some drinks together, and that's been really good for the sanity of the team, and something I'd highly encourage any remote workforce to be doing.
I let Evan know earlier when I saw him that this might be the first time I've seen him wearing a suit in 15 years. So thanks for that, Evan. Steve, you were going to add something to this?
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun and learning teams at the same time. We've got chat boards with the pets of Honey Can Do on there. We're having regular meetings. Our leadership team is meeting just very briefly for about 15 minutes a day, and then within their teams, they're meeting just about daily as well. Sending out regular emails to the whole company, even if there's not too much to report, just to let everybody know, hey, we're still together, we're still doing business, we're still a team, and reassuring everybody that we're all going to be okay, and things will go on.
Very good. Back to Luke's point on warehouse procedures and stuff like that. Obviously, you need orders and goods coming into the warehouses to implement those procedures, and that's been a real challenge. And I think where one of the most important things that the industry is dealing with right now is kind of managing cash flow. They're dealing with order slowdowns or shutdowns or cancellations. We're dealing with retailers who may be demanding extended payment terms. All of these variables that affect cash flow. Also, you're having to explore your own cost-cutting mechanisms right now, whether they're near-term or long-term. Let's start with you, Steve. How have you been able to overcome cash flow right now? How are you dealing with the slowdown? Where can you create cash flow where none kind of existed previously?
First of all, I want to say I'm incredibly sympathetic to everybody's been impacted in some way to the situation. The biggest exposure has been those brick and mortar retailers that are considered non-essential, where they've had entire store closures nationally, and they've maybe have a very, very limited e-commerce presence, since they haven't been able to make it up there. And we're doing our best. We are being sympathetic to their needs, and that's where we've gotten the push out on extended payment terms, and we're doing our best to be supportive of that as well. And that's where we're seeing the canceled orders, things that we already have investments in, and then we're just taking those into our warehouse, and just hoping that once everything goes through, we'll be able to work together on those products. Fortunately, going into this, we've got a strong income statement and balance sheet. We've got room on our bank revolver. We have a great relationship with our bank. And our bank has been incredibly supportive. From feedback that I've heard is that all banks out there are being incredibly supportive and flexible, and finding ways to work through this with each of their clients, which is just so heartwarming to hear. Opportunities we're seeing on e-commerce has been phenomenal. We've had Cyber Monday type of parcel movement for the last few weeks, which has been great. Of course, these are small orders. We've been it's been 10 years in the making of refining our e-commerce process throughout that, but we have real heavy exposure to e-commerce. And that's been kind of the saving grace, as the brick and mortar side has kind of faltered a little bit. Unfortunately, with some of the retailers pushing that out, we're doing our best to absorb that and kind of shield our partners, our production partners, from that. But they've been flexible. They've let us know kind of where their pain points are, but we're seeing flexibility all around throughout the entire supply chain, which has been fantastic.
It's one of those scenarios where everyone is feeling it. It's not one side versus the other side right now. Luke, in your role as a e-commerce consultant, obviously you might have some thoughts about if traditional retailers are not ordering goods right now, to kind of divert some of your attention and to e-commerce, and not just one e-commerce platform, but multiple e-commerce platforms. Talk a little bit about that, if you could, please.
Yeah, right now, I mean, it's definitely can be painful for companies that are positioned mainly for in-store. The saving grace, or the blessing can be if you're an e-commerce focused business, and obviously Amazon is just, their volume is massive right now. But the problem that a lot of just friends and colleagues have had is that if their products are deemed non-essential, then Amazon has stopped ordering those. So for some folks, Amazon's great. And for others, it's actually been a problem if companies are too concentrated with Amazon. So I think the sweet spot is when companies have built their businesses and are strong with Amazon, but also strong with, say, a Home Depot and a Wayfair or Walmart and some of these other retailers, along with their own direct-to-consumer. This is the time now to double down on your direct-to-consumer. So my message would be, in these types of, this can be looked at as an opportunity. If we all have teams, and sometimes our teams are focused on longer horizon ROI projects. And our challenge here, or my challenge to the team, has been pull all that back. Everything is now 90-day ROI. Obviously, we're not giving up our long-term branding for the NewAir brand, but the point is, this is a great time to double down and build relationships with buyers, and also diversify so that you're not just an Amazon business. So like I said, Wayfair is a great company, and Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart and some of these other channels. And then of course, like I just said, your own direct to consumer, continue to build out your email list and utilize that. And especially for us, we're fortunate with NewAir because we sell cooling products. So we've gotten letters from our suppliers that we're essential in the supply chain, and refrigerators are needed right now, and that's been great. But we sell other products too. And consumers, when they're in their houses, I mean, they are slowing down. Some demand is slowing down in some categories, but think about it. People are looking to improve their work at home situation. There's all kinds of things they're going to need in their house. And in the housewares industry, all of us and the listeners can supply those products. So we're uniquely positioned.
Evan, you mentioned earlier that you've not laid off or furloughed any employees, and that's an important consideration. And tomorrow there'll be a discussion on government stimulus and how the housewares industry can take advantage of that. But if you are faced with more or less some of the same fixed costs you had going into this, where else can you kind of preserve cash or generate cash?
I mean, this is a little bit different than the situation post 9/11. Post 9/11, things just shut down. Now things are working. There's plenty of things that are working well. There are plenty of things that are working better than expectation. There's a lot of talk about housewares products never having been more important, particularly with people who are around the house looking to create more comfort, looking to cook at home more. So we're spending a lot of time really being nimble and looking at places where we can drive business. We've also looked at areas where we can kind of deliver on our brand promise of doing well and keeping people healthy. And we've sourced out medical supplies. And in the first round of supplies that we were able to get, we've actually donated them to the front lines to people that we had direct connections to who were essentially working unprotected or without the proper protections in place. If that turns into a business for us, we've talked about as a company walking that tightrope of seeming opportunistic versus trying to do right by the world at large or the country at large. So what we've decided to do is that should we have the opportunity to sell these products, we will cover some of our expenses to keep the lights on and then set up a fund where the company will be able to make decisions on how we spend proceeds that we earned selling protective gear. Other thing that we did from the beginning, and what was really important to us, is we said, this is the time to throw optimism out the window. I mean, we all bring optimism into our business plans, into our business forecasts. Having gone through the financial crisis and seeing how quickly some companies failed, we wanted to stress test our model as much as possible. And we put together a real doomsday type of scenario, and then made sure we worked with our bank to tap into our credit lines to bring in enough cash on hand that we would hold a reserve, even though we're paying interest on it. We felt strongly that the banks at any time could get skittish and shut things down. So we decided to pull in a small war chest that would let us make sure that we could continue to do right by the people who work for us. And then following through with the retailers and being in touch with our retail customers, being empathetic to what they're going through, trying to support what their needs are, not looking to push back whenever there's a change in credit terms or payment terms or order cancellations. We're trying to absorb whatever we can, help in any way possible, shift goods around. There are plenty of customers whose business is strong, who need more goods, and we're scrounging to get that pulled together. And then there are others that just, they're not clear that they'll have jobs tomorrow. And in some cases, tomorrow already came and they don't have those jobs today. So hopefully furloughs will lift, things will get back to normal, and people will get back on track. But that was really the biggest thing for us, is staying as close to our people, being nimble, looking at the opportunities, and making sure that our retailers know that we're there for them. And then following it a little bit further down the track, and I think we'll talk about this later, is just making sure
it's always a delicate balance
well.
to prepare for the worst case scenario, because you need to understand what that is, but also keep your eye and your goals on what would be possibly a best case scenario, or to be prepared for a turnaround that you can participate in. One of the things that has been another concern, and it was a major issue back in early February when I was in Germany for Ambiente, everyone at that time was more concerned about the supply chain coming out of China. And it was all anybody wanted to talk about. No one could have imagined what they're dealing with right now. Everyone thought it was just going to be kind of a situation that was sort of exclusive to China at the time. And the factories had shut down. They extended the Lunar New Year, and there was some real concerns about getting goods out of China. I think there's a good point. Let's talk about the status of China's supply chain right now in terms of production capacity, delivery capabilities, and maybe the status and timing of when goods are coming. And then let's turn that into a conversation about prioritizing your inventory needs and availability. We've already talked about the relevance of housewares and appliances during and after a crisis, this kind of crisis when people are spending more time at home. We've also talked about the need to shift to shift some of your efforts to direct-to-consumer and e-commerce. But Steve, let's start with you. What's the, from your perspective, what's going on in China in terms of manufacturing and shipping right now?
We're at 100% production availability. China's back. Taiwan is obviously going real well with the tariff situation. Like most companies, we diversified to a number of other countries as well: Vietnam, Malaysia, and elsewhere. And everybody's back and ready to go. Of course, now with the situation being what it is, we're actually going back and saying, hey, can you push some of these orders out a little bit? Unfortunately, a couple of these orders that because of who the customer is, we're going to have to cancel these. But we plan on shipping these later on in the year when everybody's back to work. From a supply chain perspective, as far as we're concerned, everybody's up and running and ready to go.
Right. They were talking about before the situation of all the lockdowns in the U.S. Importers were saying anywhere from 2 weeks to a month or whatever. It was going to be a delayed supply chain, and especially if it went on much longer in China. Now, obviously, this interrupts the whole supply chain once again. Is it everyone's feeling, Luke, that a month from now, 2 months from now, whenever this is, that goods will be able to resume, the flow pretty steadily into the back half of the year?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. You mean from a sales perspective here?
From a supplies perspective, getting the stuff landed in the States and then getting it into the retailers' hands.
Yeah, I think, well, from a supply perspective, we're similar to Steve. Our factories are doing great. And it's important if you're, a key business partner with your factory and above a certain threshold, let's say, then you really matter to that factory. And it's important, just like building customer relationships. My team did a great job last year of building our factory relationship. So we were pretty solid from a supply perspective. And then kind of just like Steve finished off, now the question is kind of turned to the demand side. And it's interesting because a lot of friends, colleagues of mine, hit the pause button right away on shipments. There's not enough data really. We've only been a couple of weeks into this, coronavirus, like where the media really had this meltdown and the whole country really, the fear turned, to 10, let's say, only about 3 weeks ago. So every week as sales are monitored, we'll have more information on where the demand is. And then as far regarding the final question on like how quickly this will come back, it's hard to tell. We're uniquely positioned with digital, so we're fortunate. Folks that are dealing with some of the discounters, I think that's going to be a challenge. Some of the discounters, there's going to be a flood of excess inventory potentially for, say, the TJ Maxx's or Burlingtons. And every retail and every vertical is going to be slightly different, I think, or every channel, let's say, is going to be different on the rebound.
Right. Evan, do you expect a surge at some point, and how do you prepare yourself for that surge?
No, we're trying to prepare ourselves for every situation and not look at any one in particular. I think now it's a better position to be in to have to chase some of the business than wind up barreling in a ton of inventory that's going to sit here for an extended period of time. Right. So for us, it's really been maintaining really close communication with our factories, working on a rolling 6-month forecast that we're updating for them on a weekly basis. I believe that we're going to be able to get the capacity that we need. And I don't think this is going to be like a light switch, just turning it back on and the business is going to just crank back up. I think it's going to take a period of time, and the global marketplace comes into play in a big way here. And we're seeing it with medical supplies where things are getting bid up, and we've got concerns over whether or not we'll be able to honor pricing that we have out there when the business starts to ramp up. If there are supply chain shortages, logistics is also a concern and has been a concern for a long time, and just getting the goods here. So it's something that we're going to watch closely, and I really have, unfortunately, it's complete uncertainty.
Right. With regard to new product, obviously, everyone was ready at the beginning of the year to introduce several new products at all the trade shows. Where does new product stand kind of in the pecking order of inventory priorities right now? If you haven't necessarily had a chance to get all those in front of the consumer, are we at a point where maybe some of that new product has to be sort of backed off a little bit and the focus moves toward kind of the tried and true top selling basic items that can fill the shelf and perform well for these retailers? I'll start with Luke on that one.
Yeah, sure. Well, we've moved to a new product actually. It's right here, and we. No, but actually,
I'll give you $100 for it.
I know.
125.
Oh, here we go.
I brought some of that into the warehouse today, but no, apps. We're doubling down. Like I think new product is the lifeblood of any company. It's part of our growth strategy over the next several years. We just launched, for example, a really awesome beer froster, and it's pretty innovative. So new products, and we have a couple more really awesome launches coming later this year, and we're going to continue with those. And I think it can be done in a responsible way because you can monitor the amount of inventory you're bringing in on these new products. But I spoke earlier about a 90-day ROI. So the whole company has to be thinking about everything we're doing. It doesn't have an ROI soon, but you can't give up your future. So you still have to keep innovating and bringing in new products and developing new SKUs.
Anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with Luke 100%. There's definitely a balance. Companies are in survival mode. We got to get through the next 60, 90, 120 days and ensure that you're strong. At the same time, though, you have to continue to invest in the future. You can't just wake up one morning and say, oh, we made it through, but now we didn't make any improvements. We don't have any new products coming. We're full steam ahead. Our product development team is busy working remotely. This year we introduced a new catalog, some great ready to assemble furniture in there, and some things that we haven't been in the past. Just before COVID really hit the US, we closed on the Joyce Chen acquisition. Very excited about that. That's a new category of ethnic cookware and gadgets for us. And we're adding digital assets and busy doing things to promote that. It's definitely a balance, but you have to be planning for the future and investing in that.
Thanks, Steve. Evan, I know a lot of your business has been about innovative products and bringing new ideas to the marketplace. Is it necessary? The tendency sometimes is to sort of undermarket during this time. You're kind of focused, as someone said earlier, keeping the lights on. But if you can, isn't this a time to sort of turn up the heat on marketing and get that new product information in front of your customers? Let them know, and this speaks to retail relationships right now, let them know you're here, stay even more connected, or force yourself to be more connected with them than ever before.
So I think there's two things related to that. Yeah, obviously we're pushing hard on new products. We are staying in touch with our retailers. I'd encourage everybody to really look at how you present those products now. I mean, treat it, if you're doing it on video conference, treat it like it's a production. Make sure that you get your lighting right. Make sure you get your camera angles right. Really be able to put that in the best light that you would have been able to do at the Housewares show, at the Inspired Home show. Sorry about that. And then the second piece of it is, given what's going on in the world and orders being pushed back on a number of things, it's given us a little bit of a chance to take a breath. And we're using that time to create more marketing materials around it. So we won't necessarily be out there right now screaming about new products, pushing it at the consumer, but we're creating, I mean, really like a war chest of content that's going to be available for us to really ratchet that up when the business starts to turn back on and into Q4 when it really matters.
It's funny, at a time in the industry when people have had more direct access to consumers, whether it's selling to them, marketing to them, a moment like this tends to remind us that the retail connection and staying connected, engaged in front of your retail customers and letting them know what you can do for them is as important as conveying your product directly to the consumer. Is there any other examples? Let's stay on the topic of retail relationships. Anybody have an example, just raise your hand, of a unique circumstance that has occurred in the last week that sort of gave you some illumination on how these relationships can improve going forward? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, just a couple of examples, two to be specific. One is I received a phone call from the CEO of one of the major online retailers, multi-billion-dollar retail on a Saturday. And that isn't something that would happen under normal circumstances, just reaching out, talking about what they're seeing in the business, asking what we're seeing in the industry, what the plan is, talking about you know, in terms of everything from inventory forecast to sales forecast to marketing plans, safety. We talked about our families and what we're doing at home as well. That's something that would almost be unheard of. You know, normally, you know, the individual is a very, very gracious person, but that wouldn't happen. The other thing is, I'll say, is one of the large discount brick and mortar retailers received a phone call from the buyer and the divisional VP, just personally reaching out and explaining the circumstances, that they were requesting to cancel orders and push out the payment terms. And it wasn't, of course, a positive message, and I can only imagine the abuse that they would have taken talking to all these vendors about this when everybody's experienced these things. But it was an incredibly empathetic, sympathetic phone call. They listened to everything, asked about concerns, listened to the concerns, took them up the channel, and we had another conversation a couple days later. And just seeing that sort of partnership and working together and having these communications has been phenomenal.
Luke, how do you continue to sell at a time when maintaining, preserving relationships is vital, and it's almost sometimes it seems somewhat insensitive to try to come at someone with a real hard sell right now? How do you create that balance and continuing a sales culture while understanding all of the variables that are sort of getting in the way of that sales culture right now?
I mean, for us, it's, well, we have a newer team in sales that's phenomenal. So for us, it's only gotten better from a sales perspective and from a relationship perspective with our clients. So I would say it's two-way. It starts in two sides. I mean, first you got to think about your brand, and you know, if you're creating a real brand so that companies can't just say, hey, they're selling it for this, why are you selling it for this? And, you know, you're offering something different. You're creating unique products, and you want to create value within your brand. So it starts there, and then building those relationships. And I think more time on the phone, like for example, for us specifically, my team has got some phenomenal opportunities with Walmart.com and companies like that, where they're eager, the buyers there are eager, and they work, there's many buyers, like in every single, they have, each buyer handles like thinner slices of product categories compared to say other retailers. So there's a lot of people to talk to, and being creative on opportunities that are coming up with any of the big, you know, Father's Day or any of the big promotions that are going to be coming up in the near future. And, you know, I think sometimes people, of course, we're all, you know, we all do sales and we'll talk to buyers, but I mean, there's two levels of it. You know, there's behind the scenes perfecting all of your collateral and making sure your products are showing up and ranking. But it's amazing what a relationship will do. And those buyers have levers they can pull for you to make sure your products are featured in the right positioning. It's going to cost some money and some advertising and some collaboration, but we haven't seen a slowdown from the relationship side.
Thanks. Evan, we talked earlier about consumers that are going to be changing their behaviors. What behaviors have to change on the B2B side right now that might stick well beyond the situation today?
You know, we've approached it, and I think one of the reasons we've grown the way we have is we've always approached it that we're serving the consumer. We don't sell to the retailers, we sell through the retailers. And we're big believers in that retail outlets are the right place to right place to link up with the consumer. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to really create the needs and the demands for the retailer, for the consumer, and then service that through the retailer. And that's something that really hasn't changed for us. I think there's going to be a lot of consumer trend changes that we're going to see based on that. And I think a lot of the consumer mindset changes that are going to happen are going to lead to things that could be very beneficial to the housewares business. I think people are going to think twice about being out in crowds, dining out, going to busy restaurants. I think there'll be more and more eating at home. I think people are going to be fanatics about the way they set up their homes, making sure they have, that it really is, they're comfortable, a retreat away from the hectic world out there. And I think that there's so many things that are going to be top of mind for the consumer, and little changes that are going to go forward and are going to be probably stick in a pretty big way. I mean, it's crazy to me that cleanliness wasn't something that was quite the priority that we thought that it should be. So things like that, I think, are going to be big drivers of of retail trends. And then we just have to be there as suppliers to make sure that we're in the right place at the right time with the right products, the right offerings. And from there, it's business happens.
Yeah, let's stay on that topic as we move toward the end in terms of serving the consumer, building that relationship with the consumer, and carrying that forward right now. Steve, your thoughts on that?
Just to add to Evan's note there, we're seeing the same things. Just people on social media are who've never cooked before in their lives are cooking meals and eating at home and eating products for that. People are organizing their rooms and cleaning and using all these housewares products that they've never used before. Evan mentioned changing behaviors. I'll tell a personal story. Talking with my parents, who are they were never going to be adapters to e-commerce and ordering from home. And while I'm on the phone with them explaining how to order groceries and consumable goods on the internet and walking them through it, and the non-adapters, and they're doing it now. And I have a feeling that they're going to find this to be pretty convenient, and that they're going to be doing this even after the shelter-in-place orders are no longer there. My dad is somebody that has to read a physical newspaper every day. I'm still trying to convince him that he doesn't have to go out to the store to get a physical newspaper, and that he can do that on the internet as well. But I definitely think we're going to see permanent changing behaviors as a result of this.
Right. Luke, I'm going to turn the table on you a little bit. I know you're an e-commerce specialist, and the industry has been obviously dealing for several years now in terms of getting ready to serve an e-commerce marketplace. And retailers, brick and mortar traditional retailers, have had to evolve. We talked about they had to learn how to provide experiences, how to do things that they may never had to worry about before. How do you think the traditional retail community will be changed even further by this COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns because we don't know how long it's going to go on for. I'm of the opinion that I think it is going to go on longer, because it's a long discussion, but we're not just going to immediately get herd immunity because of a lockdown. So it's going to be hard to open everything up as quickly as, say, the government may want to, unless we get hopefully a medical breakthrough. So in light of that, I think it's going to be challenging for a lot of these retailers. But you got to look at the ones. There's some retailers that are still prospering right now, because obviously, when you look at the whole of internet or the whole of online, it's Amazon basically putting a lot of pressure on these other retailers. And of course, you have Wayfair, which is taking a lot of market share from specific types of retailers, and then Walmart and everybody else. But you have to look at who can benefit from that. So there are still the home goods stores and the home and hardware stores specifically are still going to continue to grow, I believe, in the future. If you look at what Home Depot has done, and Lowe's is making a lot of big changes internally. They went through a lot of a revamp of their whole team, and now Home Depot is launching a new platform this year. So I do think hardware is going to continue. And there's a lot of smaller regional hardware stores that, even if they're not online, they're going to continue because there is a physical need for those companies. But then you go to other stores that do sell essentials, and they are competing with the likes of Amazon, obviously. I mean, these trends have already been in place, and I think they're going to accelerate. So more challenges for some of those companies, but then other companies that are a little more sheltered from it will continue to grow alongside of Amazon and the other .com players.
Thanks, Luke. Well, before we get to the Q&A session, first of all, thanks, gentlemen. I've learned so much during this, and I'm learning new things every day. And I think keeping an open mind is part of the new normal right now. We have to see and listen and hear and hopefully get some clarity along the way. And having these types of conversations is really important to that. I'm going to give each of you, before we get to questions, one final chance to sort of sign off and leave our audience with something to think about. It may be personal, it may be related to your business, but we'll start with you, Steve.
I just want to appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel. When I when we first had the discussion about it, I said, "Wow, I can't wait to learn from these smart people out there." I was planning on viewing the panel and not being on it, but Evan and Luke, I'm learning a ton from them. So you got the perspective of two really smart guys, and then a regular person here. We're, if I could say anything to the industry, it's that we'll hunker down, we'll do our best, we'll plan our cash flow, and make it through this just fine, and then be stronger out the other side. I would say, please reach out to other people in the industry, and it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength to utilize your network, and there are a lot of good people out there who want to be helpful to you. Reach out to your retailers if you need any support there, and they'll see what they can do, and as well as your vendors. We're all going through this at the same time. It's the first time for everybody that we're going through this, and just kind of leaning on each other. And of course, I'm here for whatever support I can provide to anybody in the industry as well.
Thanks, Steve. Evan.
Yeah, I would just say, engage everywhere possible. And that could be with family. I have two college-age kids who are at home, one with a sports season canceled and been depressed on what he's missing out on. But it creates some great opportunities for engagement that typically we don't have with our kids at certain ages, or our parents at certain ages. And just staying in front of people like that. But engage with retailers, engage with business partners and your service providers, engage with people on your team. Spend time talking to people on your team that you don't normally speak with. See how they're doing. Just check in, create some of those closer bonds. And then finally, with the consumer, we're very social media heavy. We started running and we actually did one while this was going on, but we do lunch cooking live videos. And we have multi-camera, multi-participants on it. The last one that we did last week had, I think, over 160,000 impressions that were created. It just shows people really want to be connected. So be a conduit to that.
Thanks, Evan. Luke.
And just thanks for letting me be on this panel. And I just offer to anybody else out there, I love connecting with folks. So happy to connect or help anybody that might need an extra hand on the digital side. You can just reach out to me directly. And what I would say is that, to give it down to a couple of actionable things everybody can think about, is write down and talk to your leadership team and put together what are the top 5 decisions you need to make right now. And I think it's okay to be cautious and a little bit of fearful, but don't give up on the sales side. So double down on sales and marketing. Actually put together those top 5 decisions so that your actions are occurring on things that are really going to move the needle for the company. And then you do got to reduce costs. And because most of us are still getting a little bit of a demand hit, even if we're on .com, we're getting a demand hit. And, so it's fine to be near-term cautious. That's prudent, I think, in business, but long-term optimistic, because now we're going to come out of this with leaner companies. We're going to reassess every one of these expenses. Was it actually providing a necessary ROI for the company? And I think that, instead of immediately going right to our staff or labor for expenses, there's so many other, especially companies like ours where we're cost of goods companies. And when you look into P&L, looking at cost of goods for cash flow first, and other expenses and consulting expenses, and removing those first is probably a prudent thing for companies to do right now.
Well, thanks, Luke. Now it's time for me to turn it over to Liana Salama from IHA for some questions for the panelists from our audience. Liana, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Peter. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
All right. Okay. I think you can see me now too. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This was really just outstanding. Few questions that have come up throughout the course of the session, and I've tried to put them in buckets here. So I'll just kind of kick it off with some follow-up questions related to supply chain and logistics. So the several times what has come up here is kind of this question around how you guys see the long-term effect of coronavirus and it having originated, in China, impacting kind of the made in China versus made in the USA. Are there additional opportunities for US manufactured or made in the USA statements that'll come out of this long term?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you look at even the administration's stance on things, that companies that are making in the US, and unfortunately our stuff isn't, but any companies out there making things in the home electrics in the US, contact me because I'd love to partner with you guys. But I actually think it's going to be a long-term trend, not just a short-term blip. There are some of our customer services reporting that customers are a little bit concerned if things are made in China. I think the virus is dead by the time it gets here, so that's not a true concern, but there's a feeling of that. But I think to your question, Leon, I think it's more where the administration is pointing things. If you look at what's going on in the daily briefings, the whole American machinery is coming into action to solve this problem. I mean, it's actually really encouraging when you see these, all of these great American companies coming together. And I think that personally, that's going to produce a trend that's going to continue for years. So people who make here, I think, are going to have a big advantage.
Great. Evan, Steve, I see you guys nodding. Anything to add?
I mean, I completely agree. We're largely made in China. We've been able to move some out of China. We're not quite in the US yet. And that scares the hell out of me for the future of my business, because I know personally I'm thinking about where products come from. And we definitely are going to prioritize taking steps to diversify our supply chain.
Yeah, I concur with them as well. You know, we all learned the world is flat, and then as we've engaged with other countries and done business internationally, we've seen some of the pitfalls that come with that as well. So we all need to find that balance and diversify. You know, I don't know if the question was addressed to a supply chain issue or a COVID issue, but you know, there's certainly an education component, as Luke mentioned, about the germ living on a product that's been on a boat for 30 days in different types of weather, and certainly a suggestion to clean all your products, you know, once you open up the box as well.
So the follow-up question related to supply chain, just about India, if anybody is doing any sourcing from India, and you know what you anticipate, you know, the impact of that to be.
We do very little in India, just a handful of SKUs there. It's not products that we order enough that we've seen the impact of the supply chain. There were definite differences in the supply chain reliability between India and China prior to this. And we don't know yet what the impact is from our company.
And we have some products going into retail in India, and we're hearing a lot of rumblings about, I mean, widespread shutdowns and a lot of disruption going in. So we're watching it closely.
Yeah, and we're not sourcing from India right now.
Okay. Next question here, with regard to those folks who are still working in the warehouses and whatnot, does anyone have anything in place to monitor employee health? And do you have a plan in place for if something were to break out, how you're going to kind of track the flow of interaction?
Yeah, we've been watching that real closely in our warehouse. So we're taking temperatures of every employee with an infrared thermometer as they walk in the building. We're also being, and that was something that wasn't legal as of a few weeks ago, and the law was very recently changed on that specifically for this. So we're monitoring that way. We're also being very vigilant on telling people that if they have symptoms to stay home, and we're working with everybody on their paid time off policy, and being very, very flexible, because we want to encourage people to not come in that regard. And then we're also just observationally watching people, and as Luke alluded to earlier, we've got the all the social distancing and the cleaning, and wearing bandanas, because we don't want to take masks away from the healthcare providers and other responders, but just doing everything that we can to ensure a healthy environment. And obviously we want people to continue to feel safe so they show up at work. And we've even given raises during this time to our warehouse staff, just to ensure that they know how much we appreciate what we're doing, what they're doing for the company, as well as give them an incentive as well.
Does anyone else have a situation that?
Yeah, you know, just the things that we spoke about earlier. So pretty much a lot of the same things that Steve spoke about. And the key thing is a warehouse can be really safe if people are spaced, because this virus is mostly transmitted through the air. You got high ceilings, if dock doors are open, you got a lot of air moving through. And then if folks are not touching anything, literally, if they're not touching anything that anybody else is touching, and if they're not getting within 6 feet of each other, there isn't even a need for contact tracing or tracking after the fact. So we're doing the same things. We just like you, Steve, we just started the temperature monitoring. So all of these things, following CDC guidance, staying on top of it. My HR and other leadership teams done a great job at that.
Same on my side.
Question here related to essential versus non-essential business. Product, of course, is not essential, but can my warehouse come in on a light staff, practice safe distance, et cetera? How are you guys, with warehouses that are still in operation, how did you go through the process of defining essential versus non-essential and work that out?
The Department of Homeland Security has guidelines that essentially say that any warehouse worker, any person in the supply chain, it doesn't specify the types of products, are considered essential. So at that point, it's up to the company and the individual as to whether or not they stayed open. I think that Craig Bright up in the webinar tomorrow is going to be talking about that as well.
Are there any scenarios where office personnel are considered essential and can go into the office, whether it's accounting or payables, receivables, payroll? I'm just curious. Anyone?
I think you'd be hard pressed to make that claim if it was a business selling non-essential products. If they were selling essential products, you might be able to make a claim about that.
Right.
Yeah, and also look to your retailers and even ask them. We've received really positive letters from our retailers saying we are essential. Back to Steve, if you're in the supply chain, I believe overall the guidance is you're essential, but we've gotten specific letters from retailers stating we're essential, they need our products. And as far as office work goes, there are some situations where folks got to come in for certain mail. Again, these times are forcing us to move everything to ACH, by the way. So it's making this quick transition of, hey, checks were being written and now how can we write no checks? And so there's going to be a lot of positives after the fact. But anyways, I believe if groups are under 10, and in our case, 1 or 2 people comes into a 15,000 square foot office, then it's fine.
Okay, last question, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Back to kind of major initiatives, whether it's marketing, whether it's acquisition, anything else. Is there anything that, you might normally think, you should put off at this time that any of you have decided to go ahead and kind of barrel forth with?
I'll start. We were actively looking at acquisitions when this started, and I'll say that we stopped at that point and just are focusing on keeping the balance sheet strong and see if the opportunities are there later. We have some efficiency things in the office that just because of logistics and not having people there, it can't physically be done at this time. We have some improvements going on in the warehouse that are full steam ahead and moving forward, and any projects that we had in the pipeline that they can be done remotely are still moving forward as well.
Yeah, I would say for me, we've been using this as a time to actually take on a couple of very, very big business things that were kind of put off or put on the back burner, and just spending the time really being able to explore those things, keep people actively engaged, keep their brains working on it. And it's provided a great forum to bring in a lot of positivity and forward looking in such an uncertain world.
Yeah, and for us, Leon, I think by starting out with the premise of kind of like what are the top decisions that have to be made now, and then turning things to a 90-day ROI, that can change marketing behaviors for sure and sales behaviors. So it's definitely helped us kind of reassess what's important and looking at some new strategic ideas on both of those departments.
All right, well, I think we're at time. So guys, thanks you so much again, really. I think I appreciate your time and your energy in putting this together very quickly, and being there for the rest of the industry. I think this is really beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leanna, and thank you to Steve, Evan, and Luke. A reminder to our audience that there will be 2 more webinars this week, one on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central on COVID-19 and age legislation Mark Atkinson from the IHA and Craig Breitup will guide you through stimulus packages passed by the federal government and their availability to the home and housewares business. On Friday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, Joe Derechowski of the NPD Group will conduct a town hall that will examine changing consumer behavior and how consumer spending has already shifted since the crisis took hold. You can register for these free webinars by going to homeworldbusiness.com and looking for the stories we have posted on the homepage regarding this webinar series, and there are registration links inside of that story. Once again, thanks to everyone who participated today. Thanks to everyone in our audience. We are all in this together. I wish you all the luck in the world, and we hope you certainly stay safe. Thank you.